Hello, happy Tuesday. Please turn to page 82, chapter 14 in your Island of the Blue Dolphins book. Chapter 14. My leg hurt so much by the time I had reached the house that it was hard for me to crawl under the fence and move aside the heavy rock. For 5 suns I could not go out because my leg had swollen so badly and I had no herbs with which to treat it. I had enough food to eat, but on the third day the water in the basket ran low. 2 days later the basket was empty. It was necessary then for me to go to the spring in the ravine. So let's pause here just for a second. For 5 suns I could not go out. That is That is a fancy way of saying, or a stylistic way, a particular style of saying 5 days. For 5 days, she couldn't go out. So she's telling us she's been kind of on bed rest for 5 days because of her leg injury. But then she needs to go out after 5 days because she's out of water and she needs water to survive. I started out when the sun rose. I took with me shellfish to eat, also my spear and my bow and arrows. I went very slowly, for I had to crawl on my hands and knees, carrying the food tied to my back and dragging the weapons. There was a short way to go to the spring, but it was over many rocks which I could not climb, so I had to take a longer way through the brush. I reached the ravine when the sun was overhead. The spring was not far off, and I rested there, though I was very thirsty, cutting a lobe from a cactus bush to chew on. While I was resting there, sucking the juice from the cactus, I saw the big gray dog, the leader of the wild pack, in the brush above me. How do you think Karana felt in that moment? His head was down, and he was moving slowly, sniffing the tracks I had made. He saw me soon after I saw him and stopped. Behind him was the rest of the pack, trotting along one after the other. The pack stopped too. I took up my bow and fitted an arrow, but as I did this, the big dog faded away into the brush and was quickly followed by the others. In the time of one breath, they were gone. There was nothing to aim my arrow at. It was as if they had not been there at all. I listened. They were moving so silently I could not hear their steps, but I was sure they would try to surround me. Slowly, I crawled on, stopping to listen, to glance back, to measure the distance between me and the spring. My leg hurt. I left my bow and arrows behind as I went on, for the brush had grown heavy and I could not use them. In one hand I dragged my spear. I came to the spring. It flowed out of a crack in a rock, and the rock rose high on 3 sides of it. The wild dogs could not attack me from any of these directions. So I lay on the earth and drank, watching the ravine below me. I drank for a long time and filled my basket, and then, feeling better, crawled toward the mouth of the cave. A ledge of black rock ran out above it. Some low bushes grew there, and among them, with just his head showing, stood the big gray dog. He did not move, but his yellow eyes followed me, turning slowly as I drew near the cave. Another head showed behind him, and another. They were too far away for me to reach with my spear. Suddenly, I saw brush moving on the opposite bank of the ravine. The pack had split up and were waiting on both sides of the ravine for me to pass them. The cave was now in front of me. I crawled to the mouth and into it. Above me I could hear feet and the cracking of brush, which was followed by silence. I was safe. I knew the wild dogs would come back, and they did as night fell, stalking around in the brush until morning, but not venturing close. Although the mouth of the cave was small, once you were inside it spread out, and you could stand up. Water dropped from the roof, and the cave was cold without a fire. But here I stayed for 6 suns until my leg was well, crawling out only once to fetch water from the spring. While I was living there, I decided that I would make the cave into another house, where I could stay should I again get hurt or sick. And this I did as soon as I was strong and could walk. The cave went far back into the hill, around many turns, but I needed only that part which lay near the opening, in which the sun could reach during some of the day. A long time before this, my ancestors had used the cave. Why? I do not know. And along the walls on each side, they had cut figures in the stone. There were figures of pelicans floating in the water and flying, of dolphins, whales, sea elephants, gulls, ravens, dogs, and foxes. Near the opening of the cave, they had also cut 2 deep basins in the stone, which I decided to use for storing water since they held much more than the baskets. I made shelves in the side of the rock as I had done in the other house, and gathered shellfish and seeds to store there. I also gathered herbs from the hill above the spring in case I should need them. The bow and arrows I had first made, I likewise took to the cave. At the last, after I had made a good bed of seaweed and collected dry wood for my fires, I closed the opening with stones, except for a small hole at the top, which I could crawl through. All this I did, thinking of the days I had been sick and without water. It was hard work, much of it a man's work, but not until I was finished did I go back to the place where the sea elephants lived. The tide was low when I reached it. Far up on the slope lay the body of the old bull. Gulls had picked his bones clean, but I found what I had come for. Think about that. Remember, what was Karana hunting the elephant seal for? What did she need? And what was she going to do with it? Think about that. Answer it for yourself. If you're thinking, Miss P, Karana needed the teeth of the elephant seal so that she could make the sharpest spear so that she could hunt the wild dogs, you are exactly correct. Brilliant. Well done. At the bottom of page 85, we continue. Some of the teeth were as long as my hand. Whoa. Look at your hand. That's crazy. That's a big tooth. Imagine that. Some of the teeth were as long as my hand and half of its width. They were curved at the tops and some were broken. But when I had ground the best of them down with sand, I had for my work 4 good spear points, broad at the bottom and very sharp at the ends. I made 2 more spears from these points, and at last was ready to go to the cave of the wild dogs. Our seesaw summary. So in chapter 14, we learn about Karana's recovery from her leg injury. We learn how Karana takes care of herself and exercises our virtue of the week, which is what? Our virtue of this week is prudence, the virtue of thinking before we act. So Karana has to exercise the virtue of prudence all of the time because her life is at stake. She's on this island with these wild dogs who will attack her if they get the chance. So Karana has to take every protective measure she can to protect herself and to keep herself safe. And Karana, you can tell that Karana is very smart. She acts specifically and she acts in ways to ensure her safety. So her leg hurt so much, so she stayed in the cave. She only left the cave when she absolutely needed water. She didn't leave, I really want some shellfish today. Or, I really want a seagull for breakfast. She didn't do that. She made do with what she had, except when she ran out of water, which she needs to survive, right? You all know this. So she needs water, and that's the only time she leaves. We're getting the sense that Karana must have been in a good amount of pain, right? This leg injury must have been pretty serious. And if she had access to a hospital and to amazing nurses, medical personnel, and doctors, Karana would have needed a cast or something to help her leg injury heal. But she didn't have the benefit of a hospital, so she had to take care of her own, or she had to put herself in the best possible circumstances so that she could heal so that her leg could get better. So Karana talks about going to the spring, and there's two ways to get to the spring. Karana could go one way over many rocks, or she could take the longer way to the brush. Which way does Karana take and why? Look at page 82 for that question. Page 82, I'm going back to my text, page 82, and I'm looking at I skimmed, and I'm looking at my last paragraph here. There was a short way to the spring, but it was over many rocks, which I could not climb, so I had to take a longer way through the brush. I reached the ravine when the sun was overhead. The spring was not far off, and I rested there, though I was very thirsty, cutting a lobe from a cactus bush to chew on. So she's sucking some juice out of a cactus in the meantime because she needed to take a break. Her body needed to take a break, and she's caring for her body, right? We're all called to be good stewards of our bodies that are our gifts from God. She takes the longer way through the brush because her leg can't handle climbing through the rocks. And normally she could, but with her leg injury, she can't. So once she got to the spring, she was safe. Safe from what? Those sneaky wild dogs. They're back at it again. And they're moving around her. They're moving through the brush. She doesn't bring her bow and arrows. It tells us on page 83. Karana doesn't bring her bow and arrows with her to the spring because she couldn't carry them when the brush got thicker. Can't read backwards. I left my bow and arrows behind as I went on, for the brush had grown heavy and I could not use them. But she did have something. What weapon did she keep in her hand in case the wild dogs attacked? Page 83, right? We're being really good readers who can go back to our text and find the information that we need. In her left hand, or in one hand, she dragged her spear with her. So she made it to the spring to get some water, which was awesome. But she notices the leader of the wild dogs, and she sees his yellow eyes following her as she came back to the cave. This is probably really scary for her, right? When she got back to the cave, she was safe. And she decided that the cave would be a little house for her in case she ever got hurt or sick. And she got right to work in making that cave like a second house right after she was feeling strong enough. So she talks about making shelves in the side of the rock, gathering shellfish, storing up shellfish and seeds. So she is exercising the virtue of prudence. She's really being thoughtful about her actions, the virtue of prudence and foresight, so that if she ever gets hurt or sick, she has enough food stored up and resources stored up in this cave to keep her safe. Incredible. So after this, she finally goes back to the place by the cliffs where the sea elephants live, and she makes a really important discovery. What does Karana find? Karana finds the larger or the older elephant. The old bull is there. He didn't make it. Maybe in their fight he didn't make it, and he's the sea elephant. The seagulls, have eaten its meat. So when she goes up to the sea elephant, she can take its teeth pretty easily. She doesn't have to wrestle it or try to kill it. It's dead. So she can take its teeth that she needs to make her weapons, her spears, to hunt the wild dogs. And the elephant teeth, why does she go through all this work to get elephant teeth? Sea elephant teeth. Because they are the sharpest spear points available to her, and she wants to have the best, most protective spear that she can have because she is alone on this island. So she needs a strong weapon to defend her against these big wild dogs and other creatures on the island, right? So the chapter ends with Karana making points, or the spearheads for her spears. How many does she make? How many spear points is she able to make? It's on page 86. I'd like you to hold up that number for me. Does she make 5, 6, 10, 2, 3? I'm going to give you 10 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hold it up. Your answer should match mine. She had 4 good spear points, broad at the bottom and very sharp at the ends. If you said 4, well done. For your Island of the Blue Dolphins work today in your chapter packet, from pages 13 to 15, on page 13, you need to answer the main idea for chapter 14. What would you title chapter 14 and why? Would you title it The Recovery? Because it was about Karana recovering from her leg injury. Now, you can't title it The Recovery because that's the example, but that's an example for you. I want to hear your titles, and again, I'll be posting the best titles for chapter 13, 14, and 15 at the end of this week. Additionally, on page 14, you will answer comprehension question number 2. And on page 15, you will write a quote about Karana's feelings in Beyond. So identify a place in this chapter where Karana was feeling a particular feeling and write down the quote that tells us how we know that she was feeling a certain way. So if Karana was feeling afraid, where is the quote that tells us specifically this is how Karana was feeling? Some feelings you can infer. You could say, oh, Miss P, well, Karana she made 4 good spear points, so she must have been feeling proud. That's good inferring, right? We're inferring that Karana felt proud. But there's other places in the book where she tells us specifically how she was feeling. On page 84, she tells us, I was safe. I knew the wild dogs would come back, and they did as night fell, stalking around in the brush until morning, but not venturing close. So Karana tells us that she felt safe. Safe from the wild dogs, she felt secure, a sense of security in being in the cave. This is a great day since your chapter was 4 pages long. It was a good chapter, also a shorter chapter. And your chapter work today, you had some good chapter work, but you should also have time to work on your vocabulary on page 15. Okay, that's your Island of the Blue Dolphins work today. Tomorrow, Miss P will post her video for chapter 15. Peace. Come to Zoom today with any questions on chapter 14 and Island of the Blue Dolphins.